Hello, my name is Sam Breakgear and welcome to the Sociable podcast. In this episode, we will take a look at the US's budding cannabis industry, which took in over $6 billion of revenue last year and shows no signs of slowing down. To discuss this topic, I spoke with Michael Zaytsev, an award-winning entrepreneur, best-selling author, and leadership coach. Using his corporate knowledge and history from working at Google and JP Morgan, Michael was able to transfer this skill set and combine it with his interest in America's growing cannabis scene. He now works as a strong advocate and pioneer in the US cannabis industry. He has presented TEDTalks on the subject and has founded HighNY, one of the world's largest cannabis meetup groups, in addition to contributing to many top-tier publications such as Entrepreneur and Forbes. I suppose if you want to start off by introducing yourself and also giving us a little bit of a background on your history in this industry and your current presence as well.
Sure. So my name is Michael Zaytsev, commonly referred to as Mike Z. Right now I'm focused on a couple of different projects. Kind of the core focus is HighNY, which is a community organization here in New York where for the last 4 years we've been focused on building community, raising awareness about cannabis topics, and empowering people to become involved in cannabis issues. So the way we've done that has been through education and networking events primarily. So, that's kind of the main thing that takes my time. Aside from that, I have a coaching business which I work with entrepreneurs and professionals who are transitioning to entrepreneurship or just seeking greater fulfillment from work-life balance. In addition to that, I also I'm an author, so I'm working on my second book, and I'm doing writing for Entrepreneur magazine and a few other publications. And I'm also a partner in a early stage ag tech startup. And I have a little kitten. So, between all those things, I stay fairly busy.
What's your kitten's name?
Rasta.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. And then you asked about my background.
Yeah.
So before I got into the cannabis industry, I worked, I guess, what I would consider like pretty traditional corporate America jobs. So first at JP Morgan, where I was a wealth management analyst, and then at Google, where I did enterprise software sales, and then kind of found my way into coaching first, and then as I was enjoying the additional freedom and entrepreneur's journey, I kind of discovered the cannabis opportunity, which completely, enthralled me, and here I am almost 4.5 years later.
That's awesome. So when you got into this industry, was it something that was still very much underground and waiting to I suppose, still come into its own, or was this at a time when it was becoming more, I suppose, prevalent in states like Colorado or other kind of places?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started, I had worked at Google and JP Morgan in California, where the culture and the law and the everything was so far advanced compared to what I witnessed when I moved back to New York City, which is where I grew up. So for me, that was kind of like almost like I saw a geo arbitrage opportunity where I was like, I saw the future in California. And then in New York at that time, it was, we still didn't have even a medical cannabis law on the books. And when I first started organizing and producing these events, people were scared to even go they were like, well, I don't want to end up on a list.
Yeah.
I don't want people to, and it was so crazy to me, but there was still so much fear and stigma. And, so I think that it was still very much underground, and even the people for whom cannabis is an important issue or a big part of their lives, even they were, very much not comfortable with owning that, especially in any kind of public setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my challenge to fix that and ease that path.
Do you feel that the kind of stigma around it has changed, and I suppose to what extent has it changed within that kind of period of time that we're speaking from, like then and now?
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to say that it's changed a lot. Now there's, I think partially because of the media and because people are able to access real information about not only the medicine, but also the real human stories of how this has affected people's lives. And, it's like nowadays I don't think there's anyone in America who doesn't know someone who consumes cannabis in some capacity. Mm-hmm. So, it's not this big scary thing. It's something that has become a little more acceptable and normal. And I think, the data that I saw says that like over 90% of Americans support medical cannabis, mm-hmm. which is like probably the only thing 90% of Americans agree on. But I think there's been a huge positive shift, mm-hmm. and especially with, senior citizens who probably can benefit from this plant more than most populations, but they're traditionally more conservative folks and grew up during the heavy propaganda and, this is a narcotic. I think I've seen a lot more of them come around, mm-hmm. And get relief and get benefit. That all being said, I think there's a long, long way to go still, because this stigma is institutional, and mm-hmm. it's been institutionalized over decades. So to really undo that and to show people, that they're not even conscious of the stigma in many ways, that, and even like I can share a personal story that, for me, for a few years, like even after I embraced this work and kind of decided that doing this work was my life's purpose, mm-hmm. I still had shame around consuming cannabis, and I still had days where, even though, I feel like I have a legitimate medical use and am a medical patient and have been for many years, there have been days where I thought, oh, is it okay if I consume? Am I being a stoner? Am I being a pothead? Am I consuming too much? Is this appropriate? Am I being a bad boy? And like, it's ridiculous because, why should anyone care? It's like, if my body needs this plant or is signaling to me, hey, I'd feel better if my endocannabinoid system got stimulated, why not do that? It's like, if you have a headache, wouldn't you take, a Tylenol or an Advil or something? So you don't feel bad about that. So I think the point is that the stigma is very deep and very, very much still alive. So I think it's going to take several more years to really eradicate it.
Do you think that the stigma will ever fade to this? So it's perhaps on the same, cannabis is considered on the same level as something which is more socially acceptable, say, for example, like cigarettes or alcohol?
Yes. In a word, yes. I just think it's going to take a lot more time and education and integration of the plant into everyday life. Mm-hmm. Because, I believe in our lifetimes, in a few years maybe even, it'll be, you'll walk into a Whole Foods or, a Walgreens or a big pharmacy chain, and there'll either be a cannabis section or, you'll be able to get cannabis anywhere. Everyone will have widespread access. I hope, though, that it's viewed differently from alcohol and cigarettes, because in my opinion, those are much more dangerous substances. And, I think they're the true gateway drugs. And, I would love for them to be stigmatized a bit for their negative impacts on humanity. Whereas, I think cannabis, especially when you look outside of just the medical use and you look at hemp for industrial use, this is such a much more versatile specimen than anything that alcohol and tobacco can offer the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, today I remember seeing that Pepsi has announced that they're going to be looking into fusing cannabis with their drinks, and I think I saw Coca-Cola last week also announced the same. So when you talk about the idea of walking into, say, somewhere like a Walgreens and seeing cannabis products, like I can imagine Pepsi and Coca-Cola and perhaps all the other kind of food companies maybe jumping on this bandwagon once it becomes a possibility, or at least exploring the idea, it would seem anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And 4 years ago, that idea of a Pepsi or a Coke exploring this space, people would have laughed at that and thought that was, light years away. Mm-hmm. And now it's almost an inevitability. Although I would have argued that it was back then, but now it's like the momentum of legalization and commercialization has advanced so much that it's you see these institutional players that weren't ever paying attention or weren't ever publicly involved in the community or movement or industry in any way. Now they're all, really beginning to get involved. So I think we're only going to see more and more of that.
Awesome. One area that I did really want to get your thoughts on is politics, mostly because in this climate it seems that it's somewhat kind of paradoxical. I've seen some headlines saying that the Trump administration is to some extent helping the cannabis industry, but then of course there is, like, I know Jeff Sessions is famous for being against cannabis, and on top of that there's recent I remember seeing headlines that I think a Trump official or someone within the White House stated that if anyone in Canada was to be involved within their legal cannabis industry, whether it be for use or even investment, then they might jeopardize their ability to enter the US, which seems almost kind of like illogical and nonsensical considering what's happening in the US. So I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on how the industry can progress under this current administration, and also whether or not it will take another administration for this industry to really take off.
So, well, I think illogical and nonsensical is the status quo for the government. So.
Yeah.
But, I think it's, and I have to preface this with, I'm not the most political person, and this is speculation because I'm not in the White House and I don't know what's happening there. I haven't really seen this administration do much, if anything, to slow things down. They've certainly talked about slowing things down, but I haven't seen any substantial actions to actually do so. And as far as, to take a step back, if you look at the political climate here, I think cannabis has become a safe issue, which it never was before. Mm-hmm. So now, and politicians, what do they care about? Getting elected, right? So they're happy to say whatever will get them votes. And now we live in a world where, being pro-cannabis as a politician is safer than being anti-cannabis. So because of that, it's created this really, I think we've crossed this tipping point where now that you see more and more politicians than ever before being publicly supportive and also being educated on the issues and using it as even a core tenet of their campaign to attract younger voters, I think it's only going to accelerate federal legalization, whether or not we're going to see that under Trump in this administration or if we're going to see that under the next administration. I truly can't tell you. I have, optimistically, I think it's totally possible because, like, from what I've observed, Trump really likes to take credit for things. And if he were the guy that legalizes cannabis, and then he can say, well, look, I'm so great. I'm doing this amazing thing that's going to help people and make money. I'm such a genius. Look, I figured it all out, I could see that happening. But, I think it's too early to really say. But what's really exciting for me is that no matter what, in the 2020 presidential election, cannabis is going to be something that the candidates on either side have to talk about and have to have a position on. And that's never been true before on a presidential election in America. So, well, maybe like back in the day when the founding fathers were all pro-hemp, like maybe they talked about it, but, so I think in my eyes, it's now really inevitable that we have to see federal and then eventually widespread international legalization. And one trend I've seen in the last 4 years is, like 4 years ago, there was very little international cannabis business. And in the last 2 years, there's been a lot. And, with Canada beginning to export all over the world and all of these other countries that are legalizing and commercializing, or at least going towards that. So I think we'll see more of that. And, I think personally as an American, I feel bad that we're missing out on the global opportunities by letting Canada have all the fun.
Yeah.
But, I'm not running for office anytime soon, so I won't share my political views or policy opinions here.
That's okay. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm from the UK, as you can probably tell, and I believe our kind of approach to the situation is a little bit behind even the US. So don't worry, you're ahead of us, as far as I know. Maybe you can correct me on that. You might be more knowledgeable, but.
No, it's true. You guys are behind, despite having GW Pharma out there, and that just means that we should get together and start HighUK.
Sounds good. Going back to HighNY, I know that you're working on changing the stigma around cannabis in the cannabis industry. What is it that you do to help, I suppose, forward on that mission? And also, can you give examples of events you've done, or I suppose actions you've taken to help further this goal?
Yeah, certainly. So, on the most basic level, the motivation for me in the very beginning, when I described kind of what the state of New York was then, where people were so unwilling to even admit any involvement with the plant, my whole original thing was just, I have to get people together in real life, in person, to talk about this stuff. Because if people aren't actually talking to other people and connecting over this shared passion or shared interest, then there is no community. You just have a bunch of isolated people who like pot, and if that's the case, there's no strength in that. There's no potential for change in that. So my very first core motivation was just to get people together to talk about the issues and to get educated, because at that time when I created all of this stuff, I had been a cannabis user for many years, and I literally didn't know anything about it, just completely uneducated. And it occurred to me that, wait a second, I must not be the only one who's like this. There must be other people who have just found their way to the plant somehow, but don't actually know how it works or why it works or anything about it or why it's illegal. So for me, I was kind of determined to educate people. And for me, the second tenet was empowerment. If I can show someone the facts, then it's on them to, kind of decide if they're going to take a position or not. So for me, it's always just been education and awareness and trying to raise public consciousness about cannabis. So, you know, for me, I've done that with the events, and some of the events, oh boy, I've done so many now. I want to say like 50-ish. So I'll share a few. You know, I did a pot and parenting panel. I've done private equity investment. I've done a bunch of different medical education and public health panels and forums. I've got the 4th annual New York City Cannabis Film Festival coming up soon, which is, you know, a fun kind of cultural event to celebrate the community and the creativity that cannabis can facilitate, which I feel is a good way to challenge the stigma. Mm-hmm. Outside of New York, earlier this year, I did the first ever cannabis hackathon in Silicon Valley, nice. which was very exciting for me. I've had confessions of a former cannabis smuggler. I've had classes on how to grow, classes on consumer safety and how to know if what you're consuming is actually clean or whether it could potentially be harmful. I've done events on hemp. I've done events on the tech world in cannabis and ancillary opportunities. I've had some fun. I've had some fun with it.
Sounds like it. Does. Yeah. I know that you're also heavily involved in the entrepreneurial scene there in the US. What advice would you have for startups at this moment that are looking to get into the cannabis industry?
Oh, don't do it.
Why?
No, hire me if you want to do it. No. I'm kidding. Why? You have to really want it. If you're going to do it, you have to really care and you have to really want to fight, because the truth is this industry, this is my belief, right? That this is the most competitive, cutting edge, difficult industry to be an entrepreneur in, period. The only thing that compares, I would say, is maybe blockchain and crypto. But those guys have much easier access to capital, mm-hmm. which, is an additional challenge in cannabis. And I say this as someone who, before I got into this world, I thought, coming from Silicon Valley, I would, be a tech startup CEO and I would go raise venture funding and I would go down that whole path. And then I realized, wait a second, like I could compete with the Harvard MBAs of the world, or I can go into the emerging cannabis market and compete with like the passionate stoners of the world, or the, cannabis entrepreneurs, the underground entrepreneurs that don't have necessarily formal business experience. And, I've really viewed it as a competitive advantage coming from the background I had, even though I didn't have any cannabis economy experience. But that's changed so much. And the caliber of entrepreneurs competing in this space now mm-hmm. is no joke. It's, folks that have come from mature markets and mature industries and have successful track records as entrepreneurs. But beyond that, the industry is very complicated from a regulatory standpoint. It changes rapidly. So, the regulations from 6 to 12 months ago might be completely irrelevant 6 to 12 months from now. There's so many challenges that you really have to offer something really unique, and you have to be determined to bring it to life, and you have to be willing to, to fight for it, because despite the headlines, which constantly, promote how much money this industry is generating and how much progress and success there is and how large the opportunity is, despite all that, the reality of a small business entrepreneur or a startup entrepreneur, especially if you're bootstrapped or not well capitalized, and especially if you don't have a ton of entrepreneurship background, the reality is it's going to be a very, very hard battle.
Yeah.
So, if you're okay with that and you're gonna embrace that challenge, then hit me up. I'll help you for free. Because I want people like you involved.
Yeah.
But if if you think it's a quick buck or easy money or any of that stuff, then you're sadly mistaken. And that's what my book was really all about, helping these kinds of companies to be interested, because people kept asking me these kind of questions, and there was really no resource for them 2 years ago when I wrote the book. So now I'm doing the second edition, where I've interviewed 50 leading cannabis entrepreneurs, and I have a bunch of myself now. So I'm sharing a lot of my personal experience and views in this book. But really, I think business is business.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can build a business from zero, you can come do that in cannabis. You have a chance anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But cannabis is unique. This industry has its own culture and values, and the legacy of the entrepreneurs and activists and forefathers who made this industry possible. It's slightly, if not actually significantly different from what you encounter in corporate America or mature markets or other industries. So I really think, it is the Wild West, and you have to be willing to be a pioneer, and you have to be willing to be a little radical.
Yeah.
And so, if you're prepared to do that and step up and enter the industry, but it's not going to be.
So I suppose one of the last pieces of information I'd love to get from you is, what advice would you have to Americans that want to further I suppose, a positive image of the cannabis industry and bring about a better future for the industry?
Oh, wonderful question. I think I'm going to sound a little like a broken record here, but I think the number one thing is first educate yourself and really understand the complexity and depth of this issue. Because it's like this plant has been an excuse to put young men of color and young people of color in jail for decades and destroy communities of color. There's millions of people, millions of sick people in America, right? There's an opioid crisis, a prescription pill crisis that was manufactured by corporate interests, that, these companies profited over, the despair and suffering of many fellow humans. And, I believe, and a lot of the medical and scientific community that's educated believes, that we have a safe alternative here, a natural plant that can alleviate a lot of those problems. There's the environmental benefit from the hemp plant, that we could, have a sustainable, renewable source of fuel and clean nutrition, and can replace concrete and plastics and all of these things that are not eco-friendly. That it's like, if you care about healing and protecting our planet and our fellow humans, I feel like there's really no pro-cannabis, but I think a lot of people don't understand the depth of these issues, and I think a lot of people see the progress and the headlines and assume that the problems are solved, but that's far from the truth, because we have to basically rebuild these institutions in a lot of ways, from criminal justice to healthcare to even education, because once the plant is legal, what are we going to teach kids in school about this plant? So I think the number one thing is for people to understand how important this issue really is, and to also understand that we're living in this critical seismic paradigm shift where what gets decided in the next few years is going to impact the next 100 or 200 years in a major, major way. So my number one thing for people is to just open your eyes and really care, because whether you've ever tried pot or not, this issue affects you.
Fantastic. That's fair, very fair, solid advice. I swear, the last thing that I just want to pick your brains about, I remember in your TED talk you said that your mum wasn't so keen on the idea of you, I suppose, being involved in this industry. Have you managed to turn her around? Has her opinion changed at all on this subject?
I'm so happy you asked.
I'm sorry, I had to.
No, please. I'm happy to discuss this. I'll start with this. Both of my parents and my entire family have been incredibly supportive of my journey. My mother specifically, she said something along the lines of like, "You never listen to anyone anyway, so and you usually do whatever you want. So we might as well try to support you because we know your track record." I'm pleased to say that she gives me much less grief about being a consumer and about the work that I do. I think in the beginning she was very much, like disappointed that now when her friends ask her, "Oh, what's your son doing?" she couldn't say, "Oh, well, he works at Google." Now the answer is a little more complicated. But I think, they've seen the fulfillment that I've derived out of my work, and they've been to some of my events even, and they've seen, the appreciation that the community has, and I think they really understand now, especially as they've gotten more educated and have seen some family friends, use cannabis medicine successfully for serious conditions. I think now they're much more supportive and understanding, and even proud of the fact that I committed myself to something that I really believe in. That being said, I'm still trying to get my mom to get high with me one day. maybe another 4 years and I could figure that one out. But I think they've come around. Now she's like Jerry Maguire. She just hits me with, "Show me the money. Where's the money?" But no, I think honestly they've been great. They've been great about it. Much better than 4 years ago.
That's good. That's good. Well, evidently your work is doing great things, and it is doing exactly what you're hoping. It's educating people. It's showing them, I suppose, giving them a perspective which they might not otherwise see if, I suppose, everyone was divided, or the advocates for cannabis use were divided and weren't unified like HighNY intends.
Well, Sam, can I just add one more quick thing? Because, I appreciate that phrase. And for me, it's like here's another piece of advice I'd offer to entrepreneurs is like, when in doubt, model yourself after the cannabis. That's a little woohoo hippie-ish of me. It's okay because I'm a little bit of a hippie, if not a lot. But, for me, one of the most beautiful things about the plant and my experience with it is, and why I kind of fell in love with it when I was younger, is because it revealed other perspectives to me. And for me, that was such an edifying, rewarding experience. And so for me to hear from you that I've been able to do the same, I'm just, that means I'm on the right track. If I can be a cannabis plant, I want to get the whole world high off or off life, or off, just the natural possibilities of this world, because, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
So, I think when in doubt, be as the plant. Be compassionate, be inclusive, be natural, be healing. I'm sure I could think of a bunch of others, but I'm going to stop there before I get carried away. And, before we know, we'll be talking about psychedelics and all these other things.
Maybe that's a call for another podcast.
Hey, anytime, man.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike, and all the best with HighNY. Really appreciate your time today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, and it was great chatting with you, Sam.
Super. Take care now. Bye.
Have a good. Bye.